Welcome to part 2 of Leading Games. Now we're going to pick up where we just left off by emphasizing the point of you being vocal while you're leading the game. Don't just start the game and then step back and be a bystander. You want to be involved in the game. And give encouraging words. Hey, nice job. Hey, that was great. Good try. Oh, that was awesome. Give them encouragement. Now, here's a game that will show the importance of being vocal. And it's a game that I enjoy playing because you can tie in so many great applications from it. And it's an old game simply called Monster from Mars. And the way it works is you line up your class or your students all along a fence or a wall, and a large playing area for this is really important. And so say you're on a playground or an open field and you line up your students, and then you have one volunteer, one student that will stand about 15 feet in front. Now all the students will look at that one student and they'll say together, Monster from Mars, can we chase you to the stars? And then that student will say yes if, and then he's going to give a description. So for example, he might say yes if you're wearing the color blue. Now if you're wearing the color blue, what that means is you're going to chase the monster from Mars, and the first person to tag him takes his place, becomes the next monster to Mars. So here we go again. The kids are lined up. They all say, Monster from Mars, can we chase you to the stars? And your volunteer says, yes, if you're wearing white shoes. Now, if you don't repeat what he says, they're not all going to hear it. And so you're listening, you're standing right next to your volunteer. He says, yes, if you're wearing white shoes. You're going to say real loud, if you're wearing white shoes. And then all the kids with white shoes are going to chase the monster from Mars, and you're going to watch, because again, you're going to need to be vocal. You're going to watch because you're watching for the moment the first person tags that student, because you want to call it off. Because there's an assault of 15 other kids running behind trying to tag him. They're not going to know anybody's tagged him unless you tell them. And so the first student touches the monster from Mars and you say, stop, everybody, come back. And then you take the person that tagged them. They're the new monster from Mars. Everybody's lined up and you say, Monster from Mars, can we chase you to the stars? And say you play that 8 or 10 times. And some of your kids by then, they might be getting a little bit winded. And so then have everybody sit down and talk about, hey, are there really monsters? Are there really, is there a really monster from Mars? Is there a monster in your closet? Hey, what are some things that you're scared of? Well, what does the Bible say we should do when we're scared? Psalm 56:3 says, when I am afraid, I will trust in you. Or if you want to use Old English, you can even make it a rhyme. When I am afraid, I will trust in thee, Psalm 56:3. And so you teach this to your students. Maybe even have half of them say, when I am afraid, and the other half, I will trust in thee, Psalm 56:3. And so, you have fun with it. You have another quick hit, but it's a very interactive, engaging learning time. Then have them line back up, and you've got your monster from Mars from the last round out there, and they all start over again. And so you get to tie in multiple points about fear, or about handling fear, or different verses about what you should do when you're afraid as quick hits between the different rounds that you do in this game. So all that to say, that game is an illustration of why it's important for you to be vocal, because being vocal in the middle of a game helps you to maintain control. Now, there's a few other things that I want you to know before we finish this session. One is your other adult leaders. Sometimes they will have a tendency to want to stand back away from the game, especially if they're not playing. Now, ideally, you want your adults to play as much as they can. Now, there's some games that they can't really play because it just doesn't work well. Now, here's an example. We play balloon volleyball. And balloon volleyball, you'll have a row of chairs facing one direction and another row facing the opposite direction. So you've got 2 rows facing each other, and you've got kids sitting in those rows. And then right behind them, there's another 2 rows that face each other, and behind them another 2 rows that face each other. And so every child facing the same direction, they're on the same team. So the end row is trying to hit balloons over the opposing team to their other row facing the same way, and they're trying to hit balloons over, and then they're trying to hit balloons over the kids facing them, and if it lands on the floor behind that last row, then they've scored a point. So it's balloon volleyball, and you can have as many rows as you want. And a lot of times we'll throw out 1 balloon, and then we'll throw out 2 and 3, and we'll let it go for a minute or 2, and then we'll just start throwing out balloons. We'll have 15, 20 balloons, and you've got one sponsor on each end, and they're counting how many balloons land stand because they have to come over. And then you've got other sponsors on the sides, and the balloons, when they go out of bounds, those sponsors need to grab the balloons and throw them back in. Now, this game, it's not really a game that an adult can actually be in the middle of, because the kids are sitting in rows, and if you put an adult in the middle of that, their arm span is longer than a kid's. It makes it difficult to play because the kids behind them have trouble, even on their own team, sometimes getting the balloons. It hits them in the back of the head. And so sometimes adults are tall, and in the middle of a game that's sitting like that, it makes it difficult. And so the adults, notice in this game, their job is not simply to stand around the edge. Their job is to be engaged. They're picking up the balloons. They're throwing back into the kids. You want to make sure that your adults know sometimes how they can be involved if it's a game that they would look at and go, well, there's not really a place for me in there. Say that you're doing, we play a game called flag tag, where our students wear flag tag belts, and they try to pull everybody else's flags and be the last person with a flag. And sometimes as we narrow in the boundaries, because there's less and less students in it, as students get out, we will use our sponsors to stand in a square, a large area, and they become the boundary. It's another way that they can be involved. And of course, they need to be cheering the students on as well. And so help your adult leaders to understand what their role is, so that they don't just stand back, but they're actually a part of what the kids are doing. And you want them to be engaged with what the kids are doing. Now, before you even get to your game time, you want to make sure that everything that possibly can be set up in advance is set up for the game. For example, if you're doing a balloon game with younger children, we do a game where every student gets a balloon, and they try to pop everybody else's balloon, and they try to be the last person in the game with a balloon. Now, there's rules we go over. You can't stick it under your shirt, can't hide it behind your back. You've got to hold it by the part that you blow it up with, what we call the lip of the balloon. You have to pop it with your hands. You can't use objects. And so there's the rules we go over with the students. But now picture this. Picture that I'm teaching second graders, and I have not blown up any balloons before they enter the room. And now I'm passing out balloons to second graders, and some of them can't tie the balloons, and other of them are having trouble blowing up the balloons. I might spend half my recreation time just getting balloons ready, when I could have, if I had thought ahead, I could have blown up a whole trash bag full of balloons, so that when students came in, immediately they're engaged. In fact, I could even engage them the moment they step in. Say their class is coming from 2 or 3 different areas, and they might not all get there at the same time. Well, as they come in, I'm going to hand them a balloon, and I'm going to say, okay, hit your balloon, see how many times you can hit it, keeping it in the air without it touching the ground. And if a class is late, then I'm going to move to, okay, now use your foot. You can't use your hands, just your foot. How many times can you hit it to keep it in the air? And now use your head. So there's filler things that I can do. They're engaged. They're not just sitting. They're not just waiting. We're not playing. We're not starting without the other group. But I'm using my time. And even with this, I can tie in applications. Okay, the class finally got there. I'm ready to give the instructions. Well, I'm going to have a quick hit. Let's have a seat. Hey, those balloons, they were just tossed here and there. The Bible says that God doesn't want you to be tossed here and there by what you believe. That one minute you're believing this, and then the world kind of pushes you that way, and now you're believing that, and you're tossed back and forth by all these different people's opinions and different things that people tell you. God wants you to believe His Word. He wants you to be firm, solid. Now, if you were to play this game with a rock, what would be the difference? Huge difference. That rock is not going to be tossed and bounced around in the air. It's going to go straight to the ground. Why? Because it's firm, it's solid. God wants you to be solid in your faith. He doesn't want you to be easily pushed around with what you believe. And so now I've got a quick hit that I didn't even plan on doing. It was a filler, but I'm not just filling my time, I'm using my time. And now I'm going to give the rules to the game, and we're going to play the game. And so the whole point here is, if you can do things in advance to help when students arrive, do as much as you can so that you can quickly get to the activity instead of taking time to set up for it. Also, you want to make sure that you look around the room. Always be aware of items and objects in the playing area that could be harmful. For example, a hole in the ground. Just last night, I was at an activity. It was a water recreation activity. We're in the middle of a 5-week theme called The Flood, and every Wednesday night, our students come dressed to get wet, because every Wednesday they're going to get wet from head to toe. Well, I was out on actually my own playground area, and I'm standing out there, and what happens? Well, I actually step into a small hole. And it's a small hole that I didn't even know that was there. Now, I watch our playground. I go out and I walk on it because I want to know what the little danger areas are. Because if I'm playing a game, I want to know that, hey, here's where an old sprinkler system used to be, and there's a little bitty hole there, but it sticks up just enough that a student could trip over it. I want to be able to point out the danger signs. Now, if I'm on a field and there's a hole there, I'm going to put an orange cone over it. I'm going to do something. I'm going to have a sponsor stand right there to make sure that kids run around that hole. I'm not just going to point it out and say, hey, there's a hole there, don't step in it. I'm going to actually make a way to make that danger point more safe. And so you want to be aware of your area. Look for objects, things that could be dangerous, things that could be harmful. The corner of a cabinet, a chair off to the side that's in the playing area, or maybe a chair in the middle of a game that has been pushed into the playing area. Point out these dangers to your students. Remove them if you can. If not, mark them in some way with something that will immediately draw attention, or station an adult there, or stand there yourself. There are many times where I've led games and I'm standing. Typically, I'll lead a game in a small classroom standing next to the most dangerous point in that room. If there's a chalkboard, I'm going to stand by the edge of that chalkboard so the student doesn't run by and catch his shoulder or his head on that corner of that little chalk tray that sticks out. If there's a sound system that juts out, I'm going to stand there because that's where I'm going to lead the game from, because I become a barrier to keep my kids safe. It's also always good to have a first aid kit nearby. Sometimes accidents are going to happen simply because you're dealing with kids. A few months ago, I was doing an activity. It's a game that we call Minefield, and it's a game a lot of times that we use to talk about listening to God. Because we take our students, we put them into teams of partners, just partners. And one partner is blindfolded, the other partner is not blindfolded. Now, the partner who's not blindfolded cannot touch their blindfolded partner. But their job is to guide them through a minefield. And on this night, I'd used about 1,000 Tootsie Rolls spread out across the room. And so that was the minefield. You touch a Tootsie Roll, you kick a Tootsie Roll, you step on a Tootsie Roll, you are out of the game. You have stepped on a mine. And so the goal is the partner who can see is verbally guiding the blindfolded partner through the minefield. Now you can see all the spiritual applications that come from this, about listening to God's voice, about not being distracted, about not doing your own thing, about helping others find the right way. So many different quick hits that you can have in the middle of a game like that. But we're playing this game, and it's not a running game. It's not an active game. It's a walking game. And in the middle of this game, I have a 6th grade student, and he loses his balance. He was apparently trying to step over a Tootsie Roll, and he just lost his balance, and he fell, and he hit his cheek on the corner of a sound system. And it wasn't a sound system that jutted out very far. It was kind of pushed back, but the way he fell, he hit it just right, and on the corner there was a little metal piece, and it cut him. And sure enough, now I have an injury. And felt horrible about it. There really, honestly, wasn't much that I could have done to have stopped it. I would have never guessed, looking around that room, having played games in that room for years, I would have never guessed that would have happened. Sometimes you're going to have injuries just simply from the fact that you're doing something active with children. So when you do have an injury, you want to take care of it in the best way possible. You want to be prepared even for that possibility. Make sure you also avoid injuries by adapting your game to fit your playing area. For example, if you are playing in an area and you don't have a lot of space, like say the game, the Monster from Mars game. Say it's raining outside, so you're going to play it in a large room instead, but it's not exactly like you want your students running full out 100% in this room. So what are you going to do? Well, you adapt to the game. So instead of running, students have to hop on one leg. And so you can adapt to the game to fit your space. Or, other games, instead of running or hopping, they can do a duck walk or a bear crawl or a crab crawl. There's a lot of different ways that you can adapt a game to dial it back, to slow it down so that it better fits the area that you're in. Two last things I want you to see. One is use a control tool. Now, we talk about those in the segment on control tools, but in brief, a control tool helps refocus your kids. Control tools, that's where you say a question. Hey, who should be number one in your life? And the kids shout back an answer. Jesus. And so a lot of times you'd want to use a control tool that would fit the topic that you're talking about, that would tie into the game or the activity. And so use those, because a lot of times that'll get attention. And so in the middle of the game, it's very high energy, it's very active, it's very loud, and very loudly you say, who should be number one in your life? And the kids say, Jesus. Right on the heels of that, give your instructions. And then 1, 2, 3, go. I mean, keep it fast. Keep it fast-paced. Give your instructions quickly. Don't draw it out. Bring your kids in, get rid of distractions, have them in a place where they're sitting and they can listen better when you actually want to talk a little bit more. And then the last thing that I want to emphasize is when you're playing games, never allow students to choose their own teams. Anytime you allow students to choose their own teams, without a doubt, somebody is always going to be chosen last. And feeling left out or unwanted, that's not the experience that you want any student to ever have at church. This has been a session on leading games. I hope this has helped you greatly. And so go have fun. Do something energetic. Have a great time with your kids, but use those active lessons, those active games to teach your kids how to know and follow Jesus every day.